I feel like every time I want to make a new YouTube video, I'm always having a terrible skin week because I can't keep my hands off my face. So I have a lot of new subscribers since I uploaded my latest video, and thank you for that. So most of you were probably not around when, at the end of January, I took down all the videos from my channel, took down my profile picture, and changed my name to something very generic and unnoticeable. And I gave a brief explanation for that at the time. The reason was that I was attending a church at the time that I had been attending for the first 21 years of my life, and they discovered my YouTube channel, which in and of itself is not a problem. The reason it's public is because I'm not ashamed of what I have to say, and anybody in my life is free to watch my videos and draw their own conclusions. But the problem with the elders for my church is that they have power enough to determine my role and function at the church, and if they disagree with what I express in my YouTube videos, they have the power to remove my membership or even kick me out of the church. So I no longer felt safe expressing myself on my YouTube channel because they had a lot of issues with what I had to say, which is fine, except for the fact that, the scrutiny and condemnation. So I decided I wanted to branch away from being a public influencer because I no longer felt comfortable doing so. But within a month and a half, I began uploading videos again, and I put most of my videos back, except for ones where I overshare too much. That's really the only thing. I still agree with everything I've ever put on my YouTube channel, unless expressly stated otherwise. Now, the reason I decided to put everything back on my YouTube channel was I stopped attending that church, so I no longer care what those elders have to say or feel about me. I also decided to wait a little bit, a few months before actually talking about this, because I did not want to stir up some warm coals. I don't know, I can't do idioms. So today I'm going to talk about why I left that church and why I am now attending a new church that has pretty much identical values to the church that I left. So, in case those elders are watching my video, which I don't know why you would, okay? You don't even like my YouTube channel to begin with. Go watch something else. Go actually, get off YouTube. But, I just want to be clear. I don't have a problem with my church or my church's teachings, number one. Number two, the characters I'm going to relate in my story, I am not accusing anyone of abuse, especially not my parents. I'm not condemning my parents for their decisions because I know none of it was malicious. Number three, I left the church on my own volition. I was not kicked out. And number four, any decision I made as a late teen and young adult, I am taking full responsibility for. So, the church I attended for the first 21 years of my life was a very, very conservative religious. It was a very conservative traditional church. We take the Bible 100% seriously. We are young earth creationists. We don't have any female speakers at our church. We don't have any female elders or female deacons. We don't have any pastors. We just have a small number of elders pastoring the church. Our women are encouraged to wear head coverings, and, just typical traditional stuff. I am the oldest of a number of children in my family, and what tends to happen, especially in churches, is there becomes this hyper-vigilance with parents who now have a child, and they overthink a lot, and they're really scared of their child ending up bad, or they want to make sure they raise a child who ends up going to heaven, or just ends up successful. And they might be really scared of making mistakes, so they seek advice from the older elders of the church or older people in their life who have already had kids who already seem to be well behaved. It was not just one person, it was at least 3 people, if not more, or at least 3 families who gave my parents guidance, if not more. And from an early age, I began displaying unusual behaviors different from the other girls at this church. I was not physically affectionate at all. I was easily irritable, easily overstimulated, and sensitive. I struggled to make eye contact. I struggled to just get along when people talk to me or communicate with other people. I did not want to do things I wasn't interested in that did not involve my own hyperfixations, which was, for the longest time, was the Teletubbies, and then eventually snails. And because I was displaying unusual behaviors different from the other daughters of these other elders, they encouraged my parents to discipline me way more. It mostly involved spanking, but as a little kid, I was subject to unusual punishments. I won't say cruel and unusual, I will simply say unusual. I remember one time, I think I carelessly walked on my sister's towel, so my mom took my towel in front of me and wiped the area near the toilet with it so that I would, I guess, feel bad too. She also, more than once, threw my toys in the garbage in front of me when it looked like I wasn't being respectful with someone else's toys. Now, that taught me, now again, I'm not saying she was abusive for doing so, I'm saying she didn't exactly know what to do with me, because I was the oldest kid. But all that taught me was that my mom is scary. And, I still have nightmares where she is hurting me because for the beginning of my life, the punishment that I got from her did not teach me how to behave well. It just taught me to be afraid of her and that my parents, but especially my own mother, was not a safe person. Again, I am not accusing my parents of being abusive. All parents make mistakes, and the mistakes that they made led me to think that my parents were not safe people to open up to. I know my parents love me. I know my parents wanted to be safe people for me, but it felt that any time I went to them with a problem, instead of supporting me, they would always be like, well, what did you do to cause this situation? How did you hurt the other person? What did you do to make the other person upset? What can you do to fix this problem that somebody else created? So again, from a very early age, it also felt like my parents weren't on my side. My parents weren't safe and they weren't on my side. This is not maybe who they actually are. This was just what I was taught based on the treatment I received as a little kid, which just makes sense for how I turned out as an adult and some of the decisions I made as an adult that I am responsible for. I spent a lot of time when I was 18 to 19 resenting my parents, but I resent them a lot less, especially now knowing from a couple other sources in my life that they had a lot of influence from the elders to crack down harder upon me, because all their daughters were like wallflowers, well-behaved, I don't want to say submissive because they were kids, but they were more reeled in easily. But I was just a handful, I couldn't handle authority, I was very difficult to deal with, and they didn't know what to do with me. Now, again, I don't think this is because they hated me. I think they wanted me to turn out well. And a very traditional mindset to have is in order to teach a child to turn out well, you have to make sure he or she does whatever you say without question and with a good attitude. Doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. Doesn't matter if it makes the child uncomfortable. This child just has to do what you say and then he or she will turn out well. And that parenting really did not work on me. All it taught me was that I will never be good enough because I was constantly getting in trouble for things I didn't understand. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, so if I didn't like something, it was really obvious and it was really hard to control myself. And now that I'm an adult who works with kids, I think that policing how children express themselves is really bad unless the child is expressing himself by being disruptive. Then you say, okay, you can't break this, you can't throw this is not yours, and this is really disrespectful to the person it belongs to, or, it's not responsible with your things, you're gonna break them. When I was, before I was 6 years old, I do distinctly remember looking at everyone in my church and not wanting to be like them because I didn't like how they behaved and I didn't like how they treated me. But when I was 6, I developed a personal understanding of what sin meant to me and what salvation meant to me, and I asked Jesus to save me when I was 6 years old. So I became a born-again believer when I was 6 years old. Now, while my behavior did change, I believe, I went from doing really crazy things with some of the girls at school to bringing them under the playground and telling them Bible stories. But at church, my behavior apparently wasn't that different. Around 6 was when I started attending something called Kids Club at my church. It was a recently started, or at the time, recently started program where it's very similar to Sunday school. Kids learn Bible stories, they memorize verses, they learn stories about missionaries, and they play games. And I really, really clashed with the personalities of especially one of the teachers in Kids Club, but multiple of the teachers I just had issues with. And I think it's because, again, I communicate differently than other children, and a lot of these teachers thought that they could reach us by being very quirky, bubbly, and in my opinion, kind of patronizing, and I just hated Kids Club. I hated the organized games, and I made that abundantly clear, and it looked like I was having a bad attitude, which looked like I was being rebellious, so I would end up getting in trouble a lot at Kids Club, which also contributed to me hating it more, because I would be forced to play a game I didn't want to, and if I didn't do it, I would get spanked. So it was just a cycle, just a feedback loop, where I just hated Kids Club. Now, I ended up getting kicked out when I was around 8 or 9 years old, and I remember why too, and it was really dumb. So when I was about 9, I discovered what the middle finger was because my sister and I were playing Copy Me with our fingers and doing different things with our fingers, and she did the middle finger, and I did it too, and my mom was like, oh no, don't do that, that's really bad. So all my sister and I knew was that it was really bad. So, of course, we both took different opportunities to experiment with the meaning of the middle finger. She chose to do it with one of her friends at school. I chose to do it in Kids Club and was subsequently kicked out. Now, I was actually thrilled to be kicked out because, I didn't realize that I was allowed to ask to just not go anymore. So I started attending sermons and I began increasing in biblical knowledge very, very quickly. I liked that I could be treated more like an adult, or respected more as an adult when I was just listening to sermons and listening to analysis of the Bible. Meanwhile, I don't know, there must have been some bad blood between me and the old Kids Club leader, and there was this big thing about, I have to apologize to her, even though I had forgotten about everything and I was just happy to be gone. But I did write her a formal apology letter, and I gave it to her, and then she invited me back to Kids Club, and I was like, oh no, I'm good, thank you, couldn't be happier. Now, when I was about 16 years old, I started this YouTube channel, because it was COVID and I was bored and I liked talking a lot, and YouTube provided an opportunity where I could express my thoughts and beliefs, mostly Christian ones, and if you look back to my earliest YouTube videos, you'll find that they are very, very Bible focused, whether it be analyzing different videos or analyzing common theological questions. I do a bit less now because I have deconstructed a little bit and I'm still kind of deconstructing, which is not the same as, turning away from God. It's just rethinking what I've been taught about the Bible and rethinking what I've been taught about the character of God. When I was 17, I chose to enter an online relationship with a girl who turned out to be very abusive. It was very hard to get out of that relationship, and I left very, very depressed, anxious, and suicidal. I was not aware of how I felt at the time because, again, from an early age, I mentioned this in a previous recording of this video, from an early age I was displaying weird symptoms, which likely, if you're an armchair psychologist, you would look at my behavior as a little kid and be like, oh, that kid probably has autism. But my church didn't see it that way. They interpreted all my actions as willful disobedience. So instead of receiving help and support for my inability to understand neurotypical Christians, I was just thoroughly punished and basically told that if you express yourself, you will get in trouble. So I learned to turn off my personality at church. And when I began developing symptoms of depression and anxiety, I immediately blamed my recent sin of homosexuality and was like, if I distance myself from homosexuality, then I will stop feeling depressed. If I pray more and read the Bible more, I will stop feeling depressed. And I did all of those things, and I didn't feel any better. And again, I was also in denial about actually having clinical depression, and I thought, it's just breakup blues or whatever. I'm going to a new college, and it's a transition, and it's just hard to get used to. But I was just really severely traumatized from my relationship, and I was also doing a bunch of different things to distract myself that ultimately made my depression worse. my parents didn't understand what was going on because depression is not really a thing that, or like, we don't really have a history of mental illness in our family that I know of. So they were not seeing my symptoms as depression. They just saw me being lazy and unmotivated. My dad tried to create a study program or a study plan for me to succeed in college, but the problem was not that I wasn't studying enough. The problem was that I had no motivation to focus or do the work for school. I could do the homework basically, but I didn't have enough energy to do the extra self-motivated studying. So I ended up not succeeding my first year of college and having to repeat a bunch of classes. Also in college, I ended up in a new relationship with a much older adult. And just like with my last relationship, I did not go to anybody. I only talked to my friends for help. I didn't go to any really trustworthy adults in my life for help because I didn't really trust anybody, and I didn't really feel safe going to anybody to talk about what was going on, because again, from an early age, to me it felt like, based on what my parents said, I had very low value. They were not safe people to open up to, and they would never take my side. So why would I tell them that I feel really weird about the situation I'm in, or, you know, they're just gonna blame me, I felt like. And again, this is not me claiming they're abusive. This is just the patterns that I learned as a kid who was not parented perfectly, because no one is. Now, the relationship had some pros and cons. The pros were it was really the first time that I was kind of taught that I had value, which is kind of a late time to learn that when you're like 18 years old. I was showered with a lot of attention by this older adult who had gone through a lot of similar things that I had, so it felt like he really understood me and was hearing me, which was really great. The problem was, though, that he was also a romantic interest for me, and he was the only positive validation I was receiving in my life, leading me to become really, really attached to him. And after he and I ended up breaking up, it was, first of all, really difficult to find anybody after him that made me feel the same value I had when I was with him, who actually treated me like a human being the way he did. So when I tried to find other people, Christians or otherwise, after him, I couldn't find anyone I liked better than him. So I ultimately ended up, the two of us ended up getting back together. Let's see, around, I don't remember when I started deconstructing. I think around June, maybe before that. Actually, no, I think it was around like January or February. No, I don't know. Sometime in early 2024, I began actually deconstructing and questioning whether, you know, I've been doing everything a Christian is supposed to, reading my Bible every day, memorizing verses, going to church, going to youth group, Friday night Bible study, and all those things, and I still feel miserable. And there were certain things in my life that I really wanted to experiment with, like the fact that I am mostly homosexual, and the fact that I have had really bad gender dysphoria since I was 17, so I wanted to transition, I wanted to date girls. But I held back from doing so because I assumed that would make me feel even worse, because that is sin. Eventually, I just felt so bad that I figured nothing could possibly feel worse, so I began experimenting dating girls, or trying to find girls on dating apps to date. I did not end up transitioning, but I did end up like trying to date some girls through dating apps, and I did ultimately find that I felt better when I wasn't holding myself to the shame I had developed for being same-sex attracted. And again, I didn't realize I was same-sex attracted until I was 17, and I was saved when I was 6. So, and I like held back for almost 3 years before I actually like decided, screw it, I'm just gonna actually date girls now. So that didn't work out. I didn't end up finding a girlfriend, and then my ex and I got back together. My ex lives overseas, and as I mentioned, he's a lot older than me. And after we broke up the first time, I told a lot of people that bad things had happened in our relationship. So when he and I ended up getting back together, and I suggested that I visit him overseas, my friends online, who aren't even Christians, found my parents and contacted my parents and told them, oh, your daughter was groomed by this man when she was 17, which is a lie. I was 18. And she's gonna meet him in person and give him what he wants. And so, my parents received that message. You know what they care more about? They don't care that their daughter is possibly being groomed. They care, oh, she's gonna have premarital sex. So, again, I was just really upset and felt very betrayed by those friends, because I didn't think my parents were safe people to talk to, and again, as it was proved, they did not care about the possibility that I was groomed. They cared more about the fact that I would be losing my virginity to somebody who wasn't my husband. My dad tried to talk me out of doing this by scaring me about all the possible risks of having sex. He threatened to get me kicked out of the church, and there was just basically a lot of threats leading up to when I eventually decided to go overseas to meet up with this person that I had been dating on and off online for about 2 years. The first time I dated him, he's not a believer, this man I'm dating. The first time I dated him, I felt guilty about the fact that he wasn't a Christian and knew that I was supposed to date a Christian. When I decided to date him again, at this point I didn't care as much, because I found that following Christian values or just being part of a Christian community prolonged my emotional agony, but caring less about that made me feel better. So now this is me admitting to my own adult decisions. I was making decisions because I had found somebody who made me feel very safe and was very attentive to me and could understand me very well, who did not judge me for my behavior or my actions, and who seemed like, or who is, a very kind and understanding and patient person, which was not how I was treated most of my life. So understanding that I'm not supposed to date a non-believer, there are certain things you're not supposed to do until marriage, yada yada yada, I was like, I feel safer and more stable than I have in years, and I can't give it up this easily, because then I will go back to feeling really uncomfortable and depressed all the time and ashamed all the time. So, long story short, I met up with this guy in person, went super well, came back home. That was when everything really hit boiling point. So, my dad ended up having a heart attack. In addition to being on the autism spectrum, I'm pretty sure I also have OCD. I am often convinced that if I am not following God's will, he's gonna kill people that I care about. And when I tried dating girls or dating people who weren't Christians, people in their life died, and I blamed myself. So when my dad had a heart, actually, in the months meeting up with my boyfriend, or 2 meeting up with my boyfriend, I told him, I'm afraid your parents or my parents are gonna die because I don't think God wants us to do this. So when I come back from my trip, and my dad actually has a heart attack, I'm so scared because I feel like it's my fault. And just so you know, like any other Christians with mental illness, OCD, intrusive thoughts, it is not your fault. If God is going to punish you, he's going to punish you. It's going to be a punishment you can withstand. And more often than not, when people suffer illness, mental illness, or physical illness in their life, it's because we live in a fallen world where these things affect believers and non-believers alike. It is, more often than not, I would say, not because you're living in sin. If you're living in sin, you know you are. But if you're being afflicted and you have no idea what's going on, it's probably not a punishment. And you can just use this opportunity to grow closer to God and know that God is not punishing you. He doesn't hate you. This is just a test that you will get through if you trust in him. So, again, my dad ended up having a heart attack. I blamed myself, but I didn't tell anyone how I was feeling because I intrinsically knew it was probably insane to think that I caused my dad's heart attack. The following Sunday, after my dad had recovered, I went to church, and the elders called me into a meeting room to just chat, and I was pretty sure they were going to talk about my boyfriend and the whole overseas drama, and I was prepared to answer their questions with just very few answers, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because a lot of it is just not their business. I am a firm believer that, as an adult, you are not entitled to share information with religious leaders or your parents that you don't want to. I think even as a kid, you should be entitled to a certain amount of privacy. I was never taught growing up that I had privacy, and that only increased my desire to keep secrets and hide things from my parents, which ultimately led me into getting hurt in different ways. So I was just never taught that anything was private. But yeah, so that's just an extra thing. Now, it turned out that the elders had very, very little interest in my overseas relationship. They were more upset by my YouTube channel and the things I was saying on my YouTube channel. And one in particular watched a ton of videos in succession, told me that he found everything I was saying disgusting and blasphemous, told me I was mocking the church, mocking my parents, mocking people at the church, because I included an example with a couple people from my church, and I gave them pseudonyms to protect their identity, and I simply told you guys, as an example of what they told me word for word without mocking them. And I don't think anybody came away thinking that they were being mocked, except this one guy at my church. But whatever. He also found my gestures and eyebrows, my expressions flippant. And, of course, this elder mentioned that you act way differently on your YouTube channel than you do at church. I wonder why. Maybe it's because I learned from an early age to shut off my personality, because anytime I expressed myself, I would get in trouble. But here, in a community I can cultivate, people can understand that I don't actually have ill intentions, and I just talk like this, and I'm very expressive and outspoken and passionate about what I believe. So, anyways, the elders questioned me about my YouTube channel. One elder in particular, we're gonna call them good cop and bad cop, and they are not gonna like that. Sorry, that was literally the dynamic going on. So I was kind of in a good cop, bad cop situation with two of the elders at my church. Bad cop pulled up a bunch of printed out sheets of paper where he had typed out tons and tons and tons of quotes I had made on YouTube, and was fully prepared to read all of them out to me to prove that I was not a true believer based on what I was saying. And after the first thing he read, I was like, okay, he took a ton of my things out of context and is totally misinterpreting my meaning of what I am saying. So, the main qualms he seemed to have was with my, video talking about, the worst thing about Christianity, which was the frequency and practice of marital rape and marital coercion, which happens in a lot of church, and it's basically a misinterpretation of the teaching that wives are to submit to their husbands and the wife's body belongs to her husband, and a lot of churches interpret this to mean that whenever the husband has sexual desires, the woman has to give in. This is not every church, number one, and number two, this is not a biblical thing. This is a misinterpretation of a small passage in the Bible. And I was talking about that in my YouTube video, and I mentioned a couple people from my church who had said things that I found dangerous and was trying to dispel those. I was not disrespecting those people, I was dispelling some dangerous beliefs. And at one point, I think I talked about God being omniscient or omnipotent. I started thinking out loud. I started rambling. I was like, is God actually omnipotent? I know we are taught so, but are there any verses in the Bible that say he is literally all-powerful? I guess we can infer that based on the actions he did in the Bible. And I came to the conclusion that yes, the Bible basically says that he's omnipotent. I was thinking out loud. I was not mocking him or questioning his character. I was thinking out loud. And since God is omniscient, he knew that. And since he is not predisposed to hate me based on my unusual behavior, he would not have thought that I was trying to mock him on my YouTube channel. But anyways, sorry, I'm getting a little salty. I want to be cool and calm. Let's see. So then the elders began questioning my mental illness. They blamed my mental illness on the fact that I had been living in sin and that I was running away from God. They determined, based on the things I was saying on my YouTube channel, that I was not a true believer. They said that no true believer would still be struggling with homosexuality after salvation, which is untrue. Pretty much everyone I talked to confirmed it. Good Cop actually suggested that the Roman Empire fell due to homosexuality. Both of them also tried to, question my loyalty by saying, how many religions are there? And it's a trick question because the Christian answer is supposed to be two. The true religion and false religions. And first of all, if you are religious, you technically do think that way. You think the religion you follow is right, but that is not that's a very arrogant way to approach people you want to evangelize by saying there's only two religions. My religion, the true religion, and your false religion, which is just like every other false religion. That's not a loving, respectful way to reach non-believers for Christ. Let's see, yeah, they talked about my homosexuality, blah, blah, blah. They were like, do you think you're gay? Let's see, okay, well, eventually by the end of it, by the end of this whole ordeal, I do want to mention that, Bad Cop yelled at me a lot, and called the values that I was sharing on YouTube disgusting, and as I mentioned, blasphemous, and like, it was so disgusting he could barely watch them, which no one forced you to. Okay, this video is gonna piss him off. Sorry. Let's see, okay, so, very end of the interaction. They brought up my dad's heart attack, and Bad Cop addressed me and asked, do you think your dad is under a lot of pressure and stress right now? And I was like, are you implying that I gave him a heart attack? And he was like, I didn't say that. So, you can infer what you will, whether you were there or not. But he basically implied that I did give my dad a heart attack by living in sin that my dad has nothing to do with. So, they also... They had me read a bunch of verses, and they asked if I would be willing to meet with them within a week to, I guess, discuss how I felt about the matter. And I was like, I don't want to meet up in a week. And they were like, why not? Why don't you want to hang out with us again? Like, why don't you want to meet up? And I was like, because I'm uncomfortable. And then Good Cop was like, don't you trust us to have your spiritual safety in mind? And I told Good Cop, I trust you. I don't trust him. And Good Cop was like, why? We have the same beliefs. And I was like, okay, well, you're being way more approachable than he is. And then Good Cop was all like, well, I mean, like, we have different personalities. And, like, we still feel the same way. Oh, sorry, I said that in a mocking tone. I mean, Good Cop said, oh, well, we have the same beliefs. We just have different personalities and different strengths and weaknesses. Good Cop and Bad Cop, but mostly Bad Cop, did break me down until I started crying and hyperventilating and having a panic attack, which I find verbally abusive, and I talked to some other pastors, and they also agreed that it was verbally... Why am I smiling? Sorry. They also agreed that it was verbally abusive to basically break me down until I started crying. So I basically spent the rest of the week processing what had happened and deciding, am I going to continue going back to church? So, the outcome of it was essentially... They revoked my membership, so I was still allowed to attend. I was just no longer allowed to participate in the breaking of bread, aka communion. I was also no longer allowed to teach at Sunday school, which I had previously been doing, and I found that really sad. But, you know, it's not my decision. I'm not a leader at this church. So, I chose... Okay, I didn't want to go back to church because I just felt so... uncomfortable, and even traumatized by that interaction, because you have these people who are like the two most powerful men of your church. Obviously, they're not supposed to have any of their own power. They're supposed to demonstrate the character of God, which, first of all, Bad Cop was not doing that. God is loving and patient and gentle, and while he is just, that was not what was happening in that meeting. It was very poor intentions throughout the entire process of this, an intentional misinterpretation of everything I was saying, and it was clear that there was nothing I could say to convince them that I was a true believer. They just wanted to interrogate me and break me down. Okay, sorry, that's presumptive on my part, but it definitely seemed like there was nothing I could do to convince them of what they wanted to hear. I was allowed to continue attending. I ended up choosing not to, and it is not because I received consequences for living in the sin that I was doing, which is the sin of being in an ungodly relationship with a non-Christian. But I was, punished for that sin. But my issue is not with that. My issue was with how I was dealt with. I was in a very hostile environment and having my own character questioned. Something I want to finish with is, they basically said that because of the behavior I had demonstrated for the past 3 years at that point, it looked like I wasn't a Christian. But they claimed that my entire life, they had never seen any spiritual change in me, they had never seen the character of God demonstrated in me, and this makes sense because my entire life I was displaying neurodivergent symptoms, which made me look disruptive and different from the other believers at my church. So they thought that because I'm different from the other believers, I must not truly be saved. So when I finally just gave up trying to please these people who would never accept me, then they were like, gotcha, fake Christian, fake believer. But the thing I don't understand is, if you have a non-believer on your hands, don't you want to lead them to Christ? Don't you want to be inviting and welcoming to the kingdom of God? But bad cop's behavior was just really pushing me away. Good cop definitely seemed to have kinder intentions, even though he thinks that the Roman Empire fell because of homosexuality. But overall, good cop seemed to have good intentions and a good-natured way of talking to me. That's why I'm calling him good cop. By the way, the only reason I'm calling them good cop and bad cop is because they're easy to remember pseudonyms. I'm not going to reveal people's names here for their own protection, okay? But yeah. Okay, so the reason I left that church is not because I was rightfully punished for the things I did that are against what the believers in the church are supposed to do. It's because I don't think that a church with leadership that tells mentally ill people that their sin caused their loved ones to die is good leadership. I think, I'm not calling people abusive. I'm calling that behavior abusive and dangerous. I don't think it is good to blame natural causes, or natural things that happen to people, on people who have nothing to do with it, especially if they're predisposed to blame stuff on themselves because of a mental illness. I don't think it's loving or productive to corner a much younger person in a room with two older men while the two older men talk down at her and we know so much because we've been around and we're so much older and you're calling us out of touch, etc., 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 which, no, I did not. Although the belief that the Roman Empire fell due to homosexuality is a little bit out of touch. But that is neither here nor there. Okay, so the reason I ended up choosing to leave my church was because I think that the leadership was not good. It wasn't necessarily that I disagreed with who was in charge. It was more that I disagreed with their tactic with approaching sin in the church and the way they treated me and just how hostile they were and how their intent was to break me down and make me believe that I was killing people. So that is why I stopped going. When I left, a lot more stuff came out when I started attending a different church with a few members who had attended my church and left for the same reasons that I ended up leaving. There seemed to be a strong emphasis on behavior, and if you're not behaving in a conformative way, it's a sign that you were never truly saved to begin with. I am saying that not because... So first of all, if you were to go to my church's website, and I'm not going to show you, if you were to go to my church's website, the doctrine says nothing about behaving a certain way to prove you are a Christian. But because of the very traditional environment, and I'm not saying that this makes them out of touch, I'm just saying it tends to happen in the boomer generation and Gen X generation and those before. But in situations like this, there's a strong emphasis on behavior, and if you are not behaving the typical way, it looks intentionally disruptive and rebellious, and that behavior is crushed. I think that led to me having really poor self-esteem issues and feelings of unsafety as a young adult. Now, leading to, again, decisions I have made that are not the most Christ-like, which I take full responsibility for. The issues I have, again, are the elders' treatment with me and how they were not demonstrating the loving character of God, and how my entire life it felt like nothing I could do was good enough because my behavior was just naturally different than everyone else's behavior there. So hopefully, sorry this was very rambly, hopefully anybody who watched this video, or I guess, okay, what's the purpose of my video if you are not the elders from my church? The purpose of this video is not to condemn churches. I attend a church now that is very nice. It has actually a lot of autistic people at this church and people with mental illness. So everybody is a lot more caring and understanding and accepting of differences in behavior. I've made this new friend who's this autistic man who's actually quite a bit older than me, but he told me that he appreciates having me in Bible studies because I'm able to interpret neurotypical speak in a way that he can understand, because I can understand both, since I have a less severe form of autism, just enough that I look like a terribly behaved child, but not enough that I can't understand basic principles or things or whatever. So again, this is, in one sense, you could highlight that this is a problem with maybe more traditional churches, or just problems that a church might have when they don't recognize mental illness or neurodiversity. Autism is not just a curse or caused by vaccines. Can't believe we even have to say that, and I hope I don't get any of those anti-vaccinators in my comment section. You were probably vaccinated too. You probably autistic too. You ain't once taught. But autism is not a curse or a demon possession or caused by a vaccine. It is something that a lot of people are born with, possibly more now as we develop more and more genetic mutations. Possibly more people are diagnosed now because more symptoms of autism are being recognized, especially in women. And just so you know that, it is a problem when churches judge behavior that is different and doesn't conform. It's one thing if another person is abusive or hurtful, but if this person just has a hard time sitting still, that struggles to make eye contact, struggles to maybe speak without mimicking other people, or struggles to take interest in things that aren't their own special things, you shouldn't punish them. You should find a way to adapt because they are not intentionally being rebellious. And likewise, the people who tried to correct me in the past were likely not being malicious. They were going off basic archaic parenting techniques that basically say, in order to be a successful, good adult, your child has to learn strict obedience from an early age. That was really, really bad for me, and that can potentially be really, really bad for other disabled or neurodivergent believers in a church. And if you feel like this has been your experience, just know you are not alone. There's so many other churches out there. I did end up, again, choosing a church that has very similar traditional beliefs to the one I left. The difference is that they don't put the emphasis on behavior or how you present extraneous things that aren't in the Bible. I don't know if anyone actually watched this whole thing. I found it very cathartic to share. Let me know the timestamp of when you stopped watching, because I was too boring. Okay, love you, bye.